You know, truth not only is stranger than fiction, but in most cases it's funnier than fiction. A number of years ago, my brother Judge Ziglar, who was also a speaker, was going through Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a cold, rainy winter evening, and he was in the old airport, and they used to have a chocolate chip cookie machine there. And you could smell those chocolate chip cookies for blocks away. Well, my brother could handle anything except temptation. So he got close enough to smell, and he went up and he bought himself a dozen of them. Now, they were small, so it's not quite as bad as it sounded. He went into the waiting area, and there were 2 seats left, side by side. And there was a lady on one side, so he proceeded. He had his hat on and his top coat and his raincoat and his briefcase and all of the paraphernalia, that goes with traveling. He put all of those things down and his chocolate chip cookies there in that seat. And as he turned around to sit down, when he looked back over, he saw a hand coming out of his chocolate chip cookies. And, he thought to himself, well, at least you could have asked. Of course I got a dozen, it's okay. He reached over and he got himself a cookie, and then the lady looked at him kind of funny. Then in a minute or two, she got another one, and he got another one, and she got another one, he got another one, and he got the last cookie. And then she picked the empty sack up, dumped the crumbs in her hand, popped them in her mouth, and about that time the call came for her flight. Well, she got up, and he said as she walked past him, she gave him a look that would skin the hide off of a billy goat. I mean, it was some more look. He thought to himself, boy, now that is one more nervy woman. My God, these are strange people up here. Well, about 10 minutes later, his call came. He got up, slipped on his top coat, put on his hat, and underneath his hat hey, you're listening faster than I'm talking. Was a bag of chocolate chip cookies. Now, if you ever meet a woman who said, you can't believe that strange dude I saw in Charlotte, North Carolina, that was my brother that she'll be talking about. Several years ago, I got a letter from a gentleman in Toronto, Canada. The letter contained a substantial check. And he said, Mr. Ziglar, I know you don't do counseling, but I have a young friend who's destroying his health, losing his family, and I believe you're the only person he will listen to. He has great respect for you. If you will give us an hour, I will fly the 2 of us to Dallas. The check is yours if you'll spend the hour with us. Well, when somebody is that serious and has that kind of friend, boy, the first thing I thought is, man, isn't it wonderful to have a friend like that? So I sent the check back, told him to come on down. Young man's name was Steve Walker. They walked in and we started our dialogue, and it came out over a period of several moments there. I asked him, I said, now I understand that your boss is your hero. He said, that's right. He's the most successful man that I know. And I said, I also understand that you're a hard worker. He said, yes, I am a hard worker. Let me tell you just how hard he was working, because his boss was a hard worker. The young man was leaving every morning at 6 o'clock to go to work. Drove 30 miles. He got home, generally speaking, after 10 o'clock at night. On several occasions, he literally went to sleep driving. His health was deteriorating. His family was coming apart. And he was really, following this guy who was his boss. And I said, understand your boss is your hero. And he said, well, yeah, he's the most successful man I know. And I said, well, now, we kind of got to look at success and see what it is. I said, I'd like for you to tell me what you consider success to be. And we talked, and he did not come out with them in the same order that we've listed them on numbers of occasions. But the bottom line is, when we finally got through, he agreed that anybody who was happy and healthy and at least reasonably prosperous and secure, who had friends, peace of mind, good family relationships, and hoped that the future was going to be better, was a successful man. And I said, well, now let's do something that most people never do, including those of you listening to this tape. And that is, let's evaluate where we are in pursuit of what we want as versus where we think we might be. And I said to the young man, for example, we know that in any audience, if I divide the audience exactly half in two, and they're all salespeople, same experience, same territories, selling the same product, same abilities, but one keeps precise records on the people they call on, what happened, and how they can improve on the next one, will sell dramatically more than the other one will. And I said, on weight loss, if you take people, those who keep exact records on what they eat, I mean, every bite, will lose weight faster, and they will keep it off longer than will those who say, well, I don't really eat that much. You know, it depends on what they call much. Most people on that are in denial, and as you know, denial is just a river in Egypt, as far as, a lot of people are concerned. So I said, let's talk about your boss, and let's see how he measures up with your picture of success. I said, first of all, how happy is your boss? And he said, well, I don't really think he's happy. And I said, well, why do you say that? And he said, well, first of all, I almost never see him smile. I don't think I've heard him laugh a half a dozen times. And on top of that, he's got ulcers. And I said, well, let me tell you something. Based on what you just told me, we got to give him a failing grade on the happiness part there. And on the health, if he's got ulcers, that raises a failure there at this particular moment. And I said, you get ulcers not because of what you eat, but because of what's eating you. And so that means he doesn't have peace of mind. I said, now I've asked you one question, and 3 of the 8 things that you consider to be success, he doesn't have. I said, tell me about how prosperous is he? He said, oh man, he said, he is rolling in the dough. And he's making more all the time. And I said, well, okay. On the prosperity bit then, we will give him a big old plus. Now, let me ask you, how secure is your boss? Now understand, he's thinking mostly financial security. And he said, well, he's as secure as money can make him. And I said, well, now, we had an ex-governor worth over $100 million, and he went bankrupt. How does your boss compare to him? He said, oh, he doesn't have that much money. I said, well, we had an industrialist in this area worth over $500 million. He went bankrupt, so he couldn't compare with him, could he? And he said, no. So I said, well, the financial security, would it be fair to say that as far as that's concerned, there is a legitimate question? He said, yeah, things happen. Actually, only 19 of the top 100 corporations in America in 1900 are still in business today. So, we do know that things change there. I said, tell me, how many friends does your boss have? He thought of me and said, I don't think he's got any. He said, actually, I'm not his friend. I just admire him a lot. To tell you the truth, the guy is somewhat of a jerk. I said, okay, then we'll give him a failing grade on that one. I said, tell me about his family relationships. And he said, well, his wife's divorcing him. So I said, well, we kind of got to give him a big old X on that one. I said, tell me about his hope for the future. He said, well, now, he thinks he's got a great future, but I'm beginning to think that, maybe he doesn't after all. I said, well, in other words, we could put an honest question mark on the hope part. He said, yeah, I think we could. And I said, well, now let's take a little inventory of the 8 things you consider to be success. He gets a plus on 1. He gets a minus on 5. And a maybe on 2 of them. Now I said, let me ask you a question. Based on this actual, factual exploration of your admiration for the most successful man you know, would you swap places with him? The young man sat there kind of stunned for quite a few seconds. Then slowly he stood up. He extended his hand, indicating the interview was over. Now, as you listen to this tape, let me ask you a question. Would you exchange everything you hold dear to have more bucks in the bank? I dare say that nobody who ever listened to this would be willing to do that. And the good news is you don't have to. As stated in previous recordings, if you go for quality of life first, if you plan the other things, then they're far more likely to happen as well. And the better balanced you are, ultimately, the more income you're going to have. Now, I want to emphasize the point. Life cannot always be in perfect balance every day and every week. But when we keep our records and our inventory, and I do that in the goal-setting section of these presentations very, very clearly, then if we keep those records, then when we get completely out of balance, if we keep saying, well, next week I'll do better, next week I'll do better, next week I'll do better, well, then that's called to your attention. And you say, hey, this week is the next week I was talking about last week. You see, tomorrow really does come, and we need to think about that. Now, if you're going to achieve all the things we want, you got to see yourself in that category. The picture you have of yourself is so enormously important. You cannot be one kind of person and another kind of performer. You got to have a picture of yourself, and you cannot, as Dr. Joyce Brother says, consistently perform in a manner which is inconsistent with the way you see yourself. For 24 years of my adult life, by choice, I weighed well over 200 pounds. Now, I say by choice, you see, because I've never accidentally eaten anything. Always a choice. Now, if I choose to eat too much, then I have chosen to weigh too much. Over those years, I tried every kind of diet known to man. I tried the 30-day diet, lost a month. I tried dieting religiously. I quit eating in church. I can tell you this about dieting. You need to stay away from cottage cheese. A lot of people don't know it, but that's the most fattening food in existence. Now, I have no scientific evidence to validate that, but I've noticed in world travel that don't nothing but fat folks eat the stuff, so you draw your own conclusion. As far as I'm concerned, that's true. One thing that was positive I did discover is that my body retains ice cream. So, I knew that I had to do something. Well, 23 years ago, I got on a sensible eating and exercise program. Up until then, my idea of exercise simply was to fill the tub, take a bath, pull the plug, and fight the current. That was it. Now, that's not really that much of an exercise program. Now, the reality is, eating too much wasn't my problem. See, I had a picture of myself. I'm a fat boy. I'm a fat man. When my youngest daughter, who will be 40 on August 26th, was a little girl, I taught her, when she was 18 months old, to call me fat boy. Now, she didn't know what she was doing. She would laugh because I would laugh on the outside. But on the inside, it was an entirely different matter. See, I knew I was a fat boy, and it hurt. I could look in the mirror, and I could tell. I had a picture of me laying out on the diving board of the swimming pool. At least part of me was on the diving board. I could tell. I saw myself as a fat boy. And as long as I saw myself as a fat boy, it didn't make any difference how much weight I lost. It's coming right back. 100% of the time, it will come back. Until the picture changes, you've got to see yourself where you want to be. One of the most amazing and dramatic stories that I've ever heard is the story of Victor Serebriakov, unless it's succeeded by the young man Steve Walker I just talked about. I met Steve again a couple of years ago at one of the seminars, and he gave me this picture. He says, "Thank you for helping to make this possible." And it's a picture. His family is well together. They've added a member of the family. Now, that's what I call real growth. The best way is the right way, folks. He got an entirely different job, is making more money than he was making when he was killing himself, working himself to death. Victor Serebryakov, age 16, his teacher said to him, "You're a dunce, Victor. You're never going to finish school. Why don't you drop out and get a job? At least be able to support yourself." Well, he dropped out of school, and for nearly 16 years, he was an itinerant. He went everywhere, did everything, served in the army and a host of other things. But every morning, Victor would get up, he'd look in the mirror, and he would shave the dunce that looked back at him. He would dress that dunce. He would take that dunce to work. He would think as a dunce. He would perform as a dunce, and he would receive a dunce's wages. Age 31, for whatever reason, they did a psychological evaluation on him. And the results came back, and with tremendous excitement, they went to Victor and said, "Victor, I don't know whoever told you you're a dunce, and I don't know why you think you are, because the scientific evidence is compulsive. There is zero doubt that we are in error. You, sir, are not a dunce. You have an IQ of 161. You, sir, are a genius." Now, they didn't tell him anything else. No new information except the greatest information of all. You're not a dunce, you're a genius. Now he looks in the mirror and shaves a genius. He dresses a genius. He goes to work as a genius. He thinks as a genius. He performs as a genius. And the bottom line is Victor Serebryakov has a number of books out. He has several patents to his credit. He is a very successful businessman, owns several businesses. And one year he was the international chairman of the Mensa Society. And he got to have an IQ of 140 just to get in there. You see, he had the information and the knowledge and the IQ all the time. Had the wrong picture. And the wrong picture was there because of the input into his mind. And when you change the picture, that's when everything changes. Linda Isaacs is down here from Italy, Texas. Linda is African American. She's a dwarf. They evaluated her when she was just a little girl, 4 years old. They discovered she couldn't learn. They put her in school, though, when the time came, but they were really nice to her and the teacher. They told the teacher, "Now, Linda's a cute little girl. Her classmates will all call her Shorty. She's very friendly, easy to get along with. Won't give you a moment's trouble, but don't worry about trying to teach anything because you can't learn." Well, they passed her from the first to the second to the third. They said, "We don't want to have to make friends every year, a new set of friends. Just let her go on through." She graduated from high school, functioning at the first grade level. Now, what about her future? Member of a minority race, a dwarf. What are her chances? Very slim. Except her mother was getting on up in years. She had an older sister who lived right here in Dallas. Her mother brought her to Dallas to live with her older sister, who took her down to Goodwill Industries, where she met Carol Clapp. And Carol Clapp put her through this intensive 2-week acclimation school and discovered something. Linda could learn some things. Now, for 18 years, Linda had been saying, "Linda can't learn, Linda can't learn, Linda can't learn." And sure enough, she was right. Now, all of a sudden, Linda said, "Hey, Linda can learn, Linda can learn, Linda can learn." A year later, she was answering the telephone and checking the payroll and functioning almost as a secretary. Learned more in a year than she had learned in 18 years past. Now, please, do not read anything into this which I am not saying. If there's brain damage, folks, that's a different matter. And there are some cases that this is not going to work. But in every case, there will be improvement if we change the input and make it positive and upbeat, at the same time making it a realistic picture of what it's about. I'm going to tell you again, your input determines your outlook. Your outlook determines your output, and your output determines your future. The opinion you have of yourself and the opinion others have of you can make a big difference. The most moving story I've ever heard, as it relates to what happens when you change the picture, is a story told by Brian Harbour in his beautiful book, Rising Above the Crowd. When little Ben Hooper was born all those years ago in the foothills of East Tennessee, Little boys and girls who had no idea who their daddies were ostracized. They were treated horribly. By the time he was 3 years old, the other kids in that little East Tennessee community wouldn't play with him. Parents were saying idiotic things like, what's a boy like that doing playing with our kids? As if the child had anything at all to do with his own birth. When he was 6 years old, they put him in first grade, no kindergarten. And they gave him a little desk. All the kids had desks. At recess, he stayed in his desk and studied. The other kids went out and played. At lunch, he took his little sack lunch, went off, ate by himself. The other kids ate together. He had an extraordinarily tough childhood. When he was 12 years old, a new preacher came to that little church in the foothills of East Tennessee. And almost immediately, little Ben started hearing about what a wonderful man he was. How non-judgmental he was. How when he was with you, he was with you. He gave you his undivided attention. He had that charisma when he walked in a room. The spirits were automatically lifted. He was very popular in that little community. One Sunday, though, little Ben had never been to church a day in his life. He decided to go. He got there late, and he left early. He did not want to attract any attention at all. But for the first time in that child's life, he caught just a glimpse of hope. My good friend Dr. John Maxwell says if there's hope in the future, there's power in the present. I believe if there is that hope, and that's the purpose of this series, is to give every individual, whether you're a John Johnson or a Linda Isaac or any one of the hundreds of other people, the Steve Walkers of life that I've been talking about, if we can give that individual hope, then they're going to take some action. So the question is, how do you change the picture? Over the years, I've asked audiences all over the world, and I mean that literally, to identify for me what are the qualities that you would like to see in your boss, or if you're a boss, what qualities would you like to see or have in your employees? Now, for the live audience, the outline or the sheet of paper that you've been given contains a list of these qualities. I'm going to go over them simply because as you listen to this, you will need to start hearing these words, and as you listen over and over and over a period of time, they will become a part of you. Now here's something very important. I hope you've got a pen, and I hope you in the live audience will follow me, and I hope as you're listening to this tape that you will answer this question in your own mind every time I call out a word. I want you to think to yourself, and in the live audience, write it down, either an A or an S. Is that quality an attitude or is it a skill? I'm going to go down the list. Honest, intelligent, goals, organized, responsible, commitment, punctual, self-starter, optimistic, enthusiastic, motivated, decisive, focused, disciplined, persistent, positive mental attitude, team player, energetic, competent, self-image, and common sense. Now, those words will be familiar that I've gone through so far. Until we got to the word common sense, I was going exactly down the list of qualities that you put to work when you go to the day before vacation attitude. Now, the second list of words, manners, gratitude, teachable, dependable, pride, diligent, thrifty, resourceful, extra-miler, sober, loyal, respectful, caring, affectionate, supportive, sincere, attentive, personable, open-minded, a good finder, and educated. That's the second list of words there that I'm including. Now, remember, mark each one in your mind. Is it an attitude or is it a skill? Then on the third column, passion, convictions, encourager, vision, faith, wisdom, courage, confident, humble, smart, hard worker, authoritative, self-control, fair, communicator, consistent, creative, knowledgeable, humor, a good listener, teacher, and integrity. What I want you to think in terms of is those words, attitudes, are skills. Now I'd like to get you to add a couple of more words there, and that is service, attitude, and obedience. Now those are two words that in modern society people don't get overly enthusiastic about. Let me share with you a story. Lou Holtz is a good friend of mine. I've had the privilege of speaking to his team. He told me something that absolutely fascinates me. At the table there were student assistants, student managers, and there were a couple of assistant coaches. And every few minutes, one of the assistant coaches or Lou would say something, and this student manager would hop up, and in a dead run, I mean, without hesitation, they would be off to the races to do whatever he had been or she had been told to do. None of the student managers that I saw had more than 3 bites of dinner. Lou Holtz told me that in the freshman year, they have 250, roughly, student managers that come in and want to be student managers. By the end of the senior year, approximately 40 of them are left. And Lou said when he travels the country and he bumps into somebody and they say, Coach Holtz, when I was at Notre Dame, for 4 years I was a student manager. Lou said he always has the same question to ask of them. Well, let me ask you a question. What company are you running today? Or what company are you the vice president or president of? And he said almost never does he have them say anything but, well, I'm the CEO of, or I own my business and last year we did. Phenomenal. Now, why would that be? You see, two big things, really. Obedience. You got to learn to obey before you can learn to lead. So important. That service attitude. God Himself said, he who would be the greatest among you must become the servant of all. Now, let's see if we can go back and tie all of this together with that Ben Hooper story. You see, little Ben Hooper went to church one day. He caught a glimpse of that hope, and he loved the looks of it. He was back there the next Sunday, and the next, and the next, and the next. He always got there late. He always left early. Did not want any attention. On about the 6th or the 7th Sunday, the message was so moving, so powerful, so encouraging that he forgot all about the time. He did not even notice that there were people who had come in and sat down behind him. Suddenly, the message appeared to him as if there were an overhead looking right at him, and it said, for you, little Ben Hooper of unknown heritage, there is hope in the future. He got so carried away with it, he forgot about everything, and suddenly the message was over. He stood up expecting to run out again as he had in weeks gone past, but this time the aisles were clogged, he couldn't get through. As he was trying, he felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned, he looked around, he looked up. He was looking right into the eyes of the young pastor who asked him a question which had been on the minds of everybody there for the last 12 years. Whose boy are you? Instantly the church grew deathly quiet. You could have heard that proverbial pin drop. Then slowly a smile started to come across the face of the young minister, till he broke into a huge grin. And then he said, oh, I know whose boy you are. Why, the family resemblance? Son, unmistakable. You are a child of God. And with that, he swatted him across the rear and said, that's quite an inheritance you got there, boy. Now go And see to it that you live up to it. Many, many years later, little Ben Hooper said that was the day he was elected governor of the state of Tennessee and later re-elected. To be candid, I lost my earthly father when I was 5 years old. I met my heavenly Father when I was 45 years old. I don't remember my earthly father. I can never forget my heavenly Father. When I became a child of the King, that's when everything changed. When I started looking at biblical truths about success. Now, I checked them out psychologically and theologically because a lot of people want to have all the bases touched. And so I've been able to secure tremendous endorsements from all three of those disciplines. And I only mention that to say, you see, at age 45, I was stone broken in debt. Had been working hard all of my life. Have always been optimistic. I'm the kind of guy that put a dime in the parking meter while my wife goes shopping. I mean, that's my basic nature. I'd go after Moby Dick in a rowboat and take the tartar sauce with me. But nothing really happened. Nothing really happened until I looked at just who I was. That's the reason I keep saying, you see, you got to be before you can do. You got to do before you can have. Maybe my favorite expression is the fact that failure is an event. It's not a person. Yesterday really did end last night. Today is a brand new day, and the day is yours. Now, the question is, suppose, as you go down this list, how many of you, and you in the car listen to this in recording, how many of you put down most of those as being attitudes? Can I see your hands, please? All right. Is there anybody here who put down that most of them were skills? Unless you work for the Zig Ziglar Corporation. I see some of those hands. Well, the reality, ladies and gentlemen, is the best news I can possibly give you is that they are all skills. Now, let me tell you why that's so critically important. You see, it means they can be taught. If they can be taught, that means you can learn them. Now, let me ask you a question, if that's important. If our kids were taught those in our schools, how many of you believe that we would, in fact, have a reduction in drug usage, violence, teenage pregnancy, and all of those things? How many of you believe that would happen? Now, there's one exception, and we know we cannot teach faith in our schools anymore. We did the first 200 years, just can't do it anymore. Now, let me tell you, what do you mean you did it the first 200 years? You ever seen a New England primer used for 200 years in America? You know how they taught the alphabet? A and a Bible verse. B and a Bible verse. C and a Bible verse. That's the way they taught it. Absolutely. Ever pick up one of McGuffey's readers? You know what they were talking about? You got it. But we can't use that anymore. Matter of fact, you'll get in less trouble taking God's name in vain than in taking it in praise. Tragic, but that happens to be the way it is. But let me ask you a question. If all of these other qualities were taught, would we have better students? Would we be able to cut all those things down? Can I see your hand in the live audience if you believe that's true? Well, I can tell you emphatically we know it will, because our company has a course called I Can that teaches how to develop the qualities there. And yes, drug use does come down. Yes, teenage pregnancy does come down. Yes, grades do go up. Yes, attendance is better, because these are qualities that really will make a difference. Now, let me ask all of you in the live audience, and as you listen to this on recording, how many of you would love to have a mate with all of those qualities? Can I see your hand? How many of you wish all your kids had all of these qualities? Can I see your hand? How many of you wish your boss had all of those qualities? How about your employers? Would you wish your employees had all of those qualities? All right. How many of you wish that all the teachers had those qualities? And all of the politicians had all of those qualities. How about your doctor and your lawyer had all of those qualities? Would we have a better world in which we can operate? How many of you believe it would definitely be better? All right. Well, we're making some progress. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you, when you were in school, had a course which taught you how to develop all of these qualities? Got about 300 people. Would you hold your hand real high, please, if you had a course? I see one over, I see two, I see three. Do we have four? Do we have any other? Now, was it a course, or did you get lucky and have a teacher that taught it? Which was it? Teacher? Teacher? Course, all right. Did anybody else have a course? Got one that had a course. A course, okay. Two that had a course, the others had teachers. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you believe that we're missing the boat in education? Can I see your hand? Boy, isn't that a relief? All of this time you thought in your life that it was your fault, that you haven't done more with your life. And now we have identified what the culprit is. It's those educated. Boy, I can't wait until tomorrow. I'm going to get on the telephone. I'm going to call them and I'm going to tell them a thing or two. You bet I am. They ought to be teaching some stuff like this. Now, before you get too exercised about it, let me ask you some questions. Since we're in Texas, how many hours a day do the kids go to school in Texas? Anybody know? 6, okay. I thought I heard 7 from somebody else. Let's take the optimum. Let's say they go to school 7 hours a day. And how many days a year do they go to school? 180, okay. Now, that means they're in school 1,260 hours a year. Roughly 65% of that time, they're in class learning things. Now, how many hours are there in a year in Texas? Very good. Same as in Yazoo City, Mississippi, okay? Now, that is 8,760 hours. So, the kids actually are in school 1,260 hours a year. They're at home 7,500 hours a year, and mom and dad had the kids 40,000 hours before the teacher ever saw them. Now, with that in mind, how many of you think mom and dad should assume some of the responsibility for teaching these qualities and values? Can I see your hands, please? All right. How many of you believe that it would be ideal if mom and dad taught these qualities, the teachers reinforced them, and then the business community implemented them? Can I see your hands, please? Are you beginning to understand now why I talk about your personal life, your family life, and your business life all together? They go together, don't they? Okay? Now, another question. How many of you believe that it would be helpful if the parents and the teacher and the business community acquired some of those qualities before they started teaching them? Can I see your hands, please? All right. What do you call a person that practices one thing and preaches another? Hypocrite. As you well know, a hypocrite is simply a fellow who gripes and complains about the sex, nudity, and violence on his VCR. Or a hypocrite is simply a fellow who's not himself on Sunday. I get so amused that, every once in a while somebody says, I don't go to church, nothing but a bunch of hypocrites down there. I always say, friend, don't let that stop you. Come on down. We got room for one more. Not only that, but if a hypocrite stands between you and God, that just means a hypocrite's a little closer to God than you are. Well, anyhow, when you put these together, and when you look at them, if they were taught at home, reinforced in school, and implemented in the business community, then we really would have a going Jesse, as we would say at home. Now, understand this. How many of you believe that if these were taught, it would be helpful in getting a job anywhere, at any time, under any circumstances, improving our employment security? Would it help a person to be a better doctor, a better lawyer, a better mechanic, a better teacher, a better anything? How many of you in the live audience believe that would be true? All right, now, please understand that even if they had every one of these skills right there, and I'll tell you a little more about that in just a moment, but suppose a doctor had every one of these skills there, how many of you would still want him to go to medical school and learn something about medicine? Can I see your hand? All right. Now, if your mechanic had every one of these skills, how many of you would also want to know how to fix a car? Could I see your hand, please? In other words, whatever else you do, then you've got to have that specific skill for that. Would you agree with that? Now, this will give you the base to build on. And regardless of the profession you choose, I can teach anybody, how to run the gizmo that manufactures the widgets. In other words, we can teach them procedure, and that's what the employers tell me everywhere. You send me somebody with these qualities right there, I'll teach them the other. They say, yeah, but Zig, those are values. Yep, they sure are. So is lying, cheating, stealing, and irresponsibility values. And if you don't teach one, guess what they're going to happen to them? That's exactly right. They will acquire the others with very, very little effort on their part. Very few parents, have cussing sessions where they get the kids together and say, okay, kids, tonight we're going to learn 3 of the filthiest words you have ever heard. They just don't do those kind of things. But they pick it up from society, from television, from the radio. Hey, they're going to learn it anyhow. And let's take a look right there at what this is really all about, and the importance of being consistent. I think Nathaniel Hawthorne said it best. You cannot be one kind of person long and another kind of performer and get by with it. You ultimately become confused as to who you are, and your effectiveness is dramatically reduced. A lot of people say, well, Zig, aren't kids basically good? Anybody who asks that question has never watched a 2-year-old deal with a new baby brother. I can absolutely guarantee you, no, they are not basically good. We've got to teach them to be good. I love the story of the old Eskimo. Many years ago, in northern Alaska, in one of the villages, they used to have dog fights every Saturday. Well, they were vicious. And this old Eskimo owned 2 dogs, a black one and a white one. And they would always put on an incredible fight. They almost killed each other every Saturday. And interestingly enough, after a period of time, they finally had beaten themselves up so badly they couldn't fight anymore. The Eskimo retired them. And one Saturday somebody asked him, said, I noticed something rather interesting. I noticed that invariably, when you bet on the black dog won. When you bet on the white dog won. How on earth could you tell? Old Eskimo kind of smiled and said, well, it's pretty easy. I just always bet on the one I'd been feeding all week. I bet on the individual who feeds the best part of their nature with the good, the clean, the pure, the powerful, and the positive. That's the individual that I'm going to bet on over a period of time. Now, what are we feeding our young people today? The typical 18-year-old has watched 17,000 hours of television, has listened to 11,000 hours of music, has watched 2,000 hours of MTV or the movies. This does not count telephone time. It does not count athletic event attendance. It does not count dating. It does not count riding around. Now, 30,000 hours of directly being entertained, and yet I'm going to start a little word. I'm just going to say one word and ask you the question. When you're around the house with the kids, the one thing you hear the most, finish with this, I'm bored. Interesting, isn't it? See, you can't entertain people for life. At some point, we've got to wean them and start teaching them responsibility. We've got to start teaching them that they've got some things they absolutely must do. They've got to learn on their own. You see, in 30,000 hours, you can send your child through kindergarten, grade school, high school, college, medical school, have them serve an internship and a fellowship in less than 30,000 hours. Seems to me that's a better use of the time. Now, don't misunderstand. I believe there should be some pleasure in life. I don't believe if you have some pleasure that you're not going to end up being very happy. You've got to have pleasure, but we need to understand that pleasure, we ought to always ask ourselves 3 questions about it. Number 1, can I repeat this pleasure indefinitely and be happy? See, some pleasures you cannot repeat indefinitely and be happy. For example, they tell me that the first time a person deals with Coke, that there is a pleasurable sensation that absolutely defies belief. It is absolute ecstasy. Now, that's what those who've done it say. Then they say the second thing, that never again do they ever hit that same emotional high, that feeling of ecstasy as they did on that very first trip. Although they will continue to try. And then something rather fascinating happens. Frightening, really. The Coke destroys the brain's ability to reproduce dopamine and norepinephrine. And without those 2 neurotransmitters, it is impossible to experience joy and happiness. They sought a shortcut to happiness. Through that pleasure, destroyed any chance of being happy. Can I repeat this pleasure indefinitely and, without any danger? Number 2, is it morally right and fair to everyone concerned? You cannot be happy on somebody else's back. It just does not work that way. If you're taken from somebody, you're going to have a very short-term pleasure, but permanent happiness is not going to be there. Now, number 3 is kind of hitting you below the belt, but here's the third question. Would I be willing for my mama to know I'm doing this? Or to put it another way, would I be willing for this to show up in tomorrow morning's headlines, all right? We need to teach responsibility, but here's the exciting thing, and I think it's tremendously exciting, and I've said this in an earlier recording. We see, what you do off the job determines how far you go on the job. It also determines how well the kids do in school. Now, let me give you some interesting data which says a lot. Did a study on the typical American factory. In the typical manufacturing plant, the person who works by the hour on the line watches an average of 30 hours of television a week. The person in charge of the line watches an average of 25 hours of television a week. The foreman watches 20 hours of television a week. Are you noticing a little trend there? The plant superintendent watches 12 to 15 hours of television a week. The president watches 8 to 12 hours of television a week. The chairman of the board watches 4 to 8 hours of television a week. And 50% of that time, he or she is watching a training video. Now, let me ask you a question. One of the publications I read recently came out with this data. How 47% of the people feel they never have time to do anything. And yet the same people are saying they spend endless, mindless hours watching television, and 2 days later they don't have a clue as to what they learn. Here's my question. Those people who work on the line by the hour, watching 30 hours of television a week, how many of you believe that if they were to take 10 of those hours and get involved in personal growth and development and seminars and reading and learning and studying, that they might not have permanent jobs working by the hour on the line? Does that make any sense at all, folks? I don't think there's any question about it. In other words, we are not victims. There are some things that we can do to take responsibility and to take action. Now, do we really need to teach our kids all of these qualities? Well, let me give you this information. The Search Institute out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, did a survey of 270,000 young people in 600 communities in 33 states. Our research reveals that 75% of American teenagers have 20 or fewer essential developmental assets, the values and standards, the activities and structure that serve both as a safety net against destructive behavior and as an encouragement to positive action. We're not teaching what they need to know. You give me kids that have been taught these values we've been talking about, these qualities, and I'll give you a kid who is potentially a brilliant producer, who will succeed wherever they are. USA Today, August the 2nd, 1995, said 70% of the college students admitted cheating. 29 to 35% of the medical students admit on their applications concerning their research that they had exaggerated. 46% of the teens believe lying is okay. And the most frightening word that I think I've ever read in a news article, then it says only 31% of the adults do. What about that? What do we teach? How do we teach it? Telephone rings in a lot of homes. The parents, as you know, they've been telling them all the time, tell the truth. Telephone rings. Tell them I'm not home. Obey the law. Now, the reason I use a fuzzbuster is. Now, what they're really saying is, look, kid, if you're going to break the law, don't be a dumb bunny and get caught. Be smart like your old man. I mean, use your head. Why should we teach something else? It's practical. It's practical. Mortimer Feinberg, in his book, Corporate Bigamy, did an interview with 100 of the CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies and asked them what is necessary to go to the top and stay there. The answer, they got to build their careers on honesty, character, and integrity. And then they put the little summation on anybody who thinks they can go to the top and stay there, who's not honest, is dumb. You know, that's about as strong as it can get. The Justice from the Institute for the Advancement of Ethics says an unprecedented proportion of today's youth lack commitment to core moral values like honesty, personal responsibility, respect for others, and civic duty. Now, I want to emphasize something. I'm really not blaming the kids by any stretch of imagination. You see, it is not the kids' fault. Very few of them own television stations and music stations, and very few of them publish Penthouse and Playboy and all of that kind of stuff. It's our responsibility, civically, because, you see, we're all involved in crime and drugs and alcohol. My son lost his best friend when a drunken teenager ran through a go light and killed him at 90 miles an hour. We're involved in drugs. My brother-in-law had his home broken into. An heirloom pitcher was stolen. 2 hours later, it was in the veins of the heroin addict who stole it. I'm involved in crime. I pull up to a service station. It's not as true today as it was because they got all the automatic stuff out there. But the sign out there says, please pay before pumping, you know, and you got to go inside in order to get it. And here's what psychiatrist Max Levine says. There cannot be emotional health in the absence of high moral standards and a sense of social responsibility. It all goes together. Now, there's some good news that goes along with all of these. And the good news is very simply this. The way you change the picture, and the best news I can give you or anybody else, is that you already have every single one of the qualities we've identified. As you listen to this in your car, you've already got every one of them. Ziglar, are you serious? I've got all of those. Man, you got to be kidding me. If I had all those qualities, I wouldn't be listening to you. Hey, I'd be up there making the talk and you'd be listening to me. Well, all right, now let's take an honest evaluation and let's just look at a few of them. Let's look at the first one, which is honesty. Are you going to tell me there's not an honest bone in your body, that you're so crooked that when you die they're going to have to screw you in the ground? Are you going to say, hard worker, me? No way, man, I wouldn't hit a lick at a snake. Now, as you go down the list, you will discover that you have got the seed of every one of them. Now, you're terribly, terribly weak in many of them. All of us are. That's the reason repetition is so important. It's the story of the Chinese bamboo tree. You know, they plant the seed, they water it, and they fertilize it, and nothing happens the first year. The second year, they water it and they fertilize it, and nothing happens. The third year, they water it and they fertilize it, and nothing happens. The fourth year, they water it and they fertilize it, and nothing happens. The fifth year, they water it and they fertilize it, and sometimes during the course of the fifth year, in a period of approximately 6 weeks, the Chinese bamboo tree grows 90 feet or thereabouts. But did it go 90 feet in 6 weeks, or was it 90 feet in 5 years? You think about it for a moment, you know it was 90 feet in 5 years, because had there been any year they did not water it and fertilize it, there would have been no Chinese bamboo tree. 1952, I dreamed the dream that I'm living right now. Someday I'd be a speaker. It took 16 years doing it part-time before I was able to do it full-time. Then it wasn't until I was 45 years old that it absolutely exploded. 20 years I had the dream of a daily newspaper column. 18 months ago, although I'd pursued every course I knew, 18 months ago, because it never was buried, I didn't work on it every day, but I said the right things to the right lady at a seminar in Chicago, Illinois, and a few months later, the syndicated column was launched. What am I saying? I am simply saying, like the Chinese bamboo tree, it's got to be persistence involved in there. That's one of the qualities. For 16 years, I struggled desperately to get speaking engagement. In the last 23 years, I have not solicited a single engagement. And I have to turn more down than I can accept. One of the reasons is, I believe, is that I've hung in there. How many of you, for example, suspect I've done the seminar that I'm doing today before this one today? Can I see your hand? You know what I do before every seminar, even if I've done it 300, 400, 500 times? I always invest at least 3 hours. And because of this was a recording, I invested something like 20 hours in getting ready for this one. And that's on top of reading the other time that I've been talking about. I'm simply saying to you that it is not easy, but if you're willing to do these things and organize your schedule, then you can take the time to do the other things that you want to do. Hard work is part of the picture. Now, let me tell you why I'm so excited that these things are skills that we've been talking about. You see, since they're skills, they can be taught, they can be learned. That means I got a chance. It means you got a chance. It means that youngster who left the slums this morning without a bite of food to eat, maybe with a kick in the rear. It means he or she has got a chance if somewhere along the way he or she is fortunate enough to meet a Jaime Escalante. Some of you will recognize the name and the movie, Stand and Deliver. An immigrant from Bolivia was teaching in the barrio in Los Angeles, a Mexican community. Drug usage was rampant out there. Crime was high. Teenage pregnancy was bad. A lot of the kids graduated without having an education. And of all things, Escalante comes along and he said, I want to teach these kids advanced calculus, vision, dream, something big, something worthy. The authorities thought he was crazy. He persisted, and 2 years later, they let him start teaching. Despite the fact they were saying, Escalante, these kids have trouble with the multiplication table and you want to teach them advanced calculus. There's no way. 3 years later, 18 of his kids took an examination trying to win a college scholarship that is so difficult to pass the examination that less than 2% of the seniors in America will even attempt it. 18 of his kids attempted it. 18 of his kids passed it. 7 of them had the highest possible score. The authorities knew something was wrong. The kids had to cheat. Nobody does this. Oh, they were furious at Garfield High. The very idea. We know our stuff. They were so mad when they wanted them to take it over. Some of them said, I'll never do it again. And Escalante, along with others, prevailed. Give it a shot. 2 of the 18 accepted. One of them took another college scholarship. Another one decided to go in the service. The other 16 retook it. Every one of them made exactly the same grades they had made their first go-round. And 7 years later, 14 of that 16 were professionals. Doesn't make any difference where you start. It's who you are and where you go. And the neat thing is these are skills right here that can definitely be taught. They can definitely be debated. You see, Escalante had given them hope. Now, I'm going to get into something right now that I'm going to tell you with absolute certainty that if you will do it in 1 week's time, you'll be able to tell the difference. In 2 weeks' time, your family will be able to tell the difference. In 3 weeks' time, anybody who knows you will be able to tell the difference. I'm going to talk to you about talking to yourself. Self-talk. We have a 3-day seminar called Born to Win. People do come from all over the world. Last April the 12th, I got a letter from a gentleman who's a psychiatrist, Dr. Louis Cady. He's also a concert pianist. He's one that gave me some counsel in my book, Over the Top. Well, here's what he said in the letter. The experience of Born to Win was one of a lifetime, and I have already started putting numerous ideas to work. You also, quote, sold me, finally, and despite my thick skull, on using the affirmation card. The results thus far, 5 days, have been almost frightening in their intensity and speed. but in a frighteningly good way. I'm going to tell you this will work. It has worked, is working, and will continue to work in my life. It will work in your life. I'm going to encourage you that tonight when you get home, you get in front of a mirror and you take the card which is in your set of tapes, and you get in front of the mirror with this card, and we've got it all written out here. You square your shoulders, you look yourself right in the eye, and if you've got a cassette recorder there, record it as you go. You get there and you say, I, Jane Jones, am an honest, intelligent, organized, responsible, committed, teachable person who is sober, loyal, and clearly understands that regardless of who signs my paycheck, I am self-employed. I am an optimistic, punctual, enthusiastic, goal-setting, smart-working self-starter who is a disciplined, focused, dependable, persistent, positive thinker. I am an energetic team player who appreciates the opportunity my company and the free enterprise system offers me. I am thrifty with the company's resources and apply common sense to my daily task. I take honest pride in my competence and appearance and am motivated to be and do my best so that my healthy self-image will remain on solid ground. These are the qualities which enable me to manage myself and help give me employment security in a no-job security world.